Welcome to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an awesome show for you today. We're going to be talking about all of the IoT news from Microsoft Build, from Google I.O. We've got lots of updates on Google Assistant. We actually also have updates on Amazon because it's a day that ends in Y. We've got Ring has a new app. Fabaro has a new HomeKit button. Netgear has a new Wi-Fi update to stop screwing around with your HomeKit devices. And we've got some quick other news bits, including the Wise version 2 cam review and me talking about my experience so far with the Nest Hello and the Nest and Yale lock. And this week's guest is going to be Microsoft's head of IoT, Sam George, because, by golly, I happened to meet him at the show and we talked. Our podcast this week is sponsored by Machine Q. And this week's podcast is sponsored by Twilio. Twilio Programmable Wireless makes it easy for developers to program cellular connectivity, whether you're working with a few devices or thousands. Get connected fast, using no shenanigans, no contract, and pay-as-you-go pricing. You can connect devices in over 120 countries around the world. Programmable Wireless offers you the scale and strength of the Twilio network, trusted by millions of developers all over the world. Check out twilio.com/wireless. Okay, let's get our party started with Android. All right, I should tell you guys first that I am in Seattle, so broadcasting here from Seattle, so apologies for any weirdness that is not my usual weirdness. And Kevin is still located in his home base somewhere outside of Philadelphia. So, Android things. Kevin?
Yes. So even before Google I.O., which is what I was monitoring while you were at Microsoft Build, Google had announced that Android Things is out of developer preview. It is now version 1.0. They had about 100,000 downloads of the Android Things SDK. They also announced support for some more chips and boards. There's, I believe, 4 supported boards at this point. And I kind of thought Google would use Android Things to build a home hub, but I was dead wrong because it's really a platform for everybody, all their hardware partners to use and manage IoT devices and so on. The big news, which I guess is somewhat controversial, is that Google will be supporting automatic software updates for Android Things devices for up to 3 years by default, with an option for device makers to extend that support. And I say controversial because I thought this was good, but you kind of feel otherwise.
I thought it was kind of lame because, one, Qualcomm, for example, and their Snapdragon embedded chips designed for IoT stuff, their support is going to be 7 to 10 years, depending on the form factor. Microsoft, with its Azure Sphere, is supporting it for 10 years, and neither of those required an additional fee. Now, Qualcomm's a little different because they're not supporting the OS. They're just supporting the hardware underneath with updates and patches. But Microsoft's security stuff is based on 10 years of support, and it only is, you buy it when you buy the chip, basically. So you're buying into all of this. So right. This feels... And Kevin, I know you talked about like device life cycles. So Things is actually a fairly fat operating system. It's like it requires like 1 megabyte of memory, I believe.
That's a fair point. The lowest memory requirement is 512 meg of RAM, and it goes up to 1 or 2 on the other boards from NXP and Qualcomm. So yes, because a lot of the devices we talk about have like a minuscule amount of storage or memory, right?
Right. And those, I guess, would end up with the Android Wear or something else?
Okay, so it depends on what the device is, because Google has been very specific in its terms on what you can use Android Things for. And here's the quote that I pulled out from their program policy. "You are prohibited from the commercialization of products built on Android Things whose form factor is defined as a device type by the Android CCD device types, such as handhelds, watches, televisions, automotives, and any other device categories defined in the future." The reason is they have Android Auto for cars, they have Wear OS for watches, they have Android for tablets, they have Android TV for TV. So this is a totally separate thing, even though it is related.
So I could put Android Things in a hub, but I might also want to put it in like a thermostat, a smart display.
You could do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, but some of those devices are not, toss away devices. And that's where I'm getting kind of like, I've had like my connected outlets, which probably are not a good category for Android things, but I've had those for 6 years now. So I'm not sure. Again,
yeah, no, I hear
questions.
you. I also think on the lifecycle part, I really think Android things is more of a consumer device as opposed to an industrial, in which case new chips, new capabilities are coming out quicker and quicker, whether it's computer vision or whatever it may be, AI. So I think Google's kind of hedging their bets on that lifecycle change.
Okay. Well, I was going to say our June oven runs Android. It doesn't run Android things, but it does run Android.
That's true, because Android things didn't exist. And, well, it sort of did, actually, when the June was... It was actually Brillo at the beginning.
Oh, Brillo. But no one knew what Brillo was. We were all like, what?
Right. No, but you're right, because Android has run in, I'll call them embedded systems, such as the June oven, such as the Wink Relay.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and those are things that I'd be hacked off if my $1,500 oven broke after 3 years. Okay, that's just me. Also, from Google I.O., not the pre-launch of exciting IoT platforms, they updated a lot with Google Assistant. So it now can handle multiple commands, something that the Echo can do. And it also supports customized routines. And the notable thing on customized routines I thought that was interesting was that it allows for scheduling, which currently Madam A and the Amazon Echo do not do. So Google kind of leapfrogged them a little bit there. And that actually does kind of turn your Google Home into a home hub in a way.
Yeah, it's like a pseudo hub now when it gains functions like that. That's correct. So that's very promising. And they definitely showed off their AI chops with the demos and showing multiple commands, totally unrelated commands, and how they parse it and all that was really interesting. Probably worth the watch if you didn't see the keynote, which is available on YouTube. So I'm excited by this. I think I'm really now embedded in the Google Home system, and I don't think I'll buy any more Echo stuff. I was leaning that way anyway, but I like what they're doing.
Me too. So I'll wait till you hear the Nest doorbell stuff that I'm going to talk about. What? Okay, now I did talk to a couple people about this, and they were like, with the continued command or continued conversations, they were like, so it's listening all the time. And they were like super freaked out by this. So I'm very curious where the normal people in the world are going to fall on this line.
Well, yes, but the Echo does listen for another 5 seconds as well now, because you can say thank you to Madam A and she's listening for that. And you can even say another command. So that's already happening on the Echo for at least 5 more seconds.
True. Oh, you can also tell your Google, you can set it up so you have to ask it please.
Pretty please.
Is it pretty please or just please?
The feature's called pretty please, but you don't have to say pretty please for the Echo to do something.
That's good, because I think the last time I said pretty please, I was probably 15 and begging for like my mom to buy me some clothes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
So let's see. And then we'll get to what I will call the super cool / creepy / questionable section of the Google I.O. demo, which was Assistant it was called Google Duplex. And it basically let Assistant call something on your behalf, ask for information and negotiate for you, which if you haven't heard it, you gotta listen because it's kind of mind-blowing.
I really thought they outsourced humans to make appointments for people when they demoed the appointment, when they said, Google, make me a haircut appointment at this time and this day. And then you heard a phone call to a salon. I thought it was a human. I mean, I'm like Turing test. This passes this use case.
And Google says they're going to use this. They could see themselves using this to like automatically update restaurant hours and get information from real people that currently they can't do. So like things like, is this closed on Super Bowl Sunday? The robot.txt, that doesn't tell you that necessarily. So Google now can just call people and ask.
Right. It shifts the burden of, information. The restaurant may not update their website to show hours and so on and so forth. So how do you find out? Well, you call. They have made it automated to do that, and they gather the information and they can update the website.
So yes, crazy. That's my insightful commentary there. Crazy. So at Microsoft Build, which is where I am, and you'll hear more about some of the stuff they announced there when we talk with Sam, but they also demoed another digital assistant, several actually. They demoed Madam A talking to Microsoft's Cortana. And this was something announced a while back, but no one knew how it was going to work, really. But a couple things. I called this a UI bust when I was writing about it because the latency was tremendous. So it started out with this woman asking, Madam A, open Cortana. And then, hi, this is Cortana. How can I help you? And she said, what's on my calendar for the day? And then Cortana, after saying what was on her calendar would say, "Can I help you with anything else?" And then she might ask a follow-up question. So that was fine. Like the UI sounds good, but in action, there was a huge, like a 2 to 3 second latency. Even the demoers were talking over the assistants. So it was definitely a little clunky, it felt. And then Microsoft is talking about Microsoft will be handling your business needs and Madam A will do your home needs. But in another example, he was talking to Cortana and he was getting his information from Cortana. And then he was like, Cortana asked to open Madam A. And then he wanted an Uber ride. And an Uber ride to me is not either a business or a personal thing. That is just a thing you do in both realms. And how would you remember who could offer you that?
And that's the key right there. That's the obstacle to me. You now have to associate an assistant name with different tasks or context. And I just think that's horrible.
It's just, and Satya Nadella in his keynote actually talked about he was like, voice apps are big. They're going to have to be a branded experience. And I don't want branded experiences that I have to remember and call on. So GE actually has a cooking assistant called Geneva that you can control via Madam A with, if you have GE appliances. Bosch has one called, I think it's Mikey or Mikey, maybe. And see, I can't even remember. Yet I have a Bosch dishwasher and a Bosch microwave. So holy cow. This is too much for me I can barely remember my family members' names when I'm shouting out commands to them. So Lord help me when I'm trying to remember branded voice app names.
Yeah, I don't know how else they would actually make this work. So I get why they went this way, but to me, it just doesn't work.
Agreed. So I wasn't too keen on that. You can sign up. We'll include the link in the show notes and test this out for yourself sometime after an invite, and then hopefully it will be available. I think it's before the end of this year. So we'll see. Amazon also last week launched the general availability of in-skill payments. And I don't know if we have not been following the concept of in-skill payments, but basically what this is, any customer can buy something within an outside skill without having to leave that skill. So as a merchant, you have to register with Amazon Pay so I can use my details in my Amazon account to pay for your product. So some of the companies that are using this already are TGI Fridays, 1-800-Flowers. So I can now order everything. I say, Madam A, open Fridays. I start the process and then I can order everything I want and leave. So
yeah, I like this. I don't do a lot of shopping by voice, but all the cards I would use for online shopping are already registered with Amazon anyway, so it's a smart move on their part.
Yeah, think of that Uber ride. You could just have it charge you back, which means you could actually, I know you can send people Ubers finally now, but like you could, as the account owner, call an Uber for like a drunk friend at your house and send them on their way. So that would be nice. Or a drunk friend at the office. But then would you ask Cortana or would you ask Madam A? Who knows?
Is it expensible? I don't know.
Depends on the level of employee.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about some quick new kind of items. So Ring has a new Neighbors app. And Kevin, you want to tell us what this is?
Yeah, so Ring already had like a neighborhood type sharing aspect to it if you wanted to opt into it. So like if my Ring doorbell sees something sketchy in the neighborhood, other people in my area who have a Ring app and are opted in, they could get some information about it. But now apparently that information can just be sent directly to the police. There's probably some parameters and opt-ins for this as well, but it's a nice expansion of the neighborhood, kind of like a virtual neighborhood watch type system.
Yes. So what happens is, yes, it will send it automatically to the police, but also if the police start a case file on something, they can actually start with that case file requesting data from other Ring cameras in the vicinity. Now, I don't know if you can refuse that request or not, but there are some implications here. And these are the same implications that plague Nextdoor, which, I don't know if you're on Nextdoor, but I am. And every now and then you get, people are like, there's an African-American man walking down the street. And you're like, oh yeah, he lives there. So there's a lot of danger for things like racial profiling. And that I had asked Jamie Siminoff about this years ago when we talked about it, because his goal was to create this quote unquote ring of security around your home and neighborhood. And he said they were trying to do things to encourage people to kind of think carefully before reporting a situation to avoid some of that racial profiling. I've never actually seen that in the Ring app, but I don't use it consistently. I use it probably once every year, 18 months as I'm testing out a new device. So I'm curious what kind of things that they will include in that, because Amazon can't be unaware that this is a definite thing that's going to happen. The other aspect of this that I think is kind of interesting is package thievery is a huge problem for Amazon. They now own Ring. Could this kind of privatize the cops to work on behalf of Amazon to prevent package thefts? So that's my crazy.
No, that's actually not a leap. That makes sense.
So we'll see how that is in action. And if you have a Ring doorbell, feel free to tell us if it's letting you racially profile people. All right. Other news bits. Time for the news bits. Kevin, I know you were excited. Well, I think you might be excited about this one.
I thought you'd be more excited because you love this little thing. This is the Fabaro button that we saw at CES. It is now available, and this is the HomeKit compatible button. It's $60.
Which is $10 more than the regular button.
Yes. Which seems to be the going rate from Fabaro for any HomeKit version of an existing device. But you've used this, I think. It has 3 actions. You can do a 1 tap to do something, 2 taps for something else, and hold it down for a 3rd action. So you can set a scene, turn off lights, maybe lock a door, depending on how many clicks or taps. So
mine has 5 taps.
Oh, maybe HomeKit does only 3. I don't know.
Yeah, mine has way more actions. Well, not way more. Double the actions, I believe. So, okay. So that's out if you're into the Fabaro HomeKit sensor. Did you like those sensors? Would you recommend that to a HomeKit user or no?
The Fabaro sensors?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I think they're among the best out there. They just seem to be the most consistently performing ones out there, yes.
But they are expensive. But
they are expensive, yes.
All right. In the Wi-Fi is tough category, the Netgear Orbeez actually did an update a while back because I don't know if you guys all remember, if you had a Google Home, they were flooding your router with packets and it was causing problems for people who had Google Home products and I think some other maybe Chromecast products in the Netgear Orbi world and some other mesh Wi-Fi routers. So Netgear updated that. Unfortunately, when they did that, they apparently broke some HomeKit functionality for their HomeKit users. So now they have launched a workaround for that while they figure out a permanent workaround for all issues associated with Wi-Fi. So there you go. Intel Capital and the NBA are teaming up to invest in sports. This is AI in sports. This is IoT in sports. This is whatever, pick a buzzword, blockchain, anything. Basically, the concept is how to make sports better because sports is a wonderful source of entertainment. And there's really a lot of opportunity here. So I'm really kind of curious to see what comes out of that. If you have a good idea for this arena for basketball and the actual arena, call Intel Capital. Trend Micro did a great report on the habits of people who hack into surveillance cams. So this was a really fun is probably the wrong word for this, but they took a look at all of the networks that offer and traffic in exposed IoT cameras, whether it's surveillance, whether it's webcams. And the freakiest thing I found out was you basically buy these you can buy access to the cameras, you could buy access to the videos, and the pricing for this is ridiculous. So the prevalent model is called the pay per camera or pay per package model. The price usually ranges from $1.50 to $5 per item, and it could go for less than $1 for items that are on sale. So if you're like a hot lady who's got a webcam that's been hacked, you're probably going to be on the $5 end of the scale. Otherwise, hacked baby monitors maybe at the $1 end of the scale. I don't know.
I'd have to pay people to watch me on a camera.
I don't know. I might pay 50 cents to watch Norm jump up and down on the couch.
Oh, there you go. Norm cam.
So we'll link to the report because I thought it was really interesting. And then there is also a new version of the $20 Wise camera. We put this on our gift guide last December and tried it out and thought it was lovely. I will note, because we were a little confused at first, this is not a totally local camera. There is an SD card slot, but there's also cloud storage associated with it, and the stuff does go to the cloud. So if you want the remote feed, it's going to be from the cloud. So
it's free.
It is free for 14 days, which is a ridiculously long amount of time. So the new Wise 2 camera review says basically It's $20. Why not? It's actually really good, with the exception of one weird thing that people don't like, which is that it's hard to find your stored videos. Recorded video clips are difficult to find, and that is it.
And for integration purposes, it works with the Amazon Echo and also with If This Then That, but not, say, if you have a SmartThings hub or Wink hub like I do, no integration there. So I still may drop $20 on one just to try it out because I'm paying, for Nest to store everything and alert me and everything. And it's just, gosh, I could buy a Wisecam 2 every 2 months for the price of the Nest subscription.
Exactly. Now, there is shipping, so your total price for this, if you buy it on Wise, is going to be $26.
I can live with that.
Okay, there you go. I'm like, they're not offering you free shipping on your $20 camera, which... yeah, okay, I can see that. So, yeah, for you guys that are looking at a camera and you're like, do I need this? Do I want this? You could buy this and see. And if you don't, we used to have our set up in front of our fish tank and we had like a fish cam, which was relaxing, actually. Speaking of reviews, so I finally, between travel and glitches with devices, got my Nest Hello doorbell and my Nest Yale lock installed all together. For accuracy purposes, these are not on the same door because the doors where my doorbell is do not support connected locks because they have a weird locking mechanism. So that's the crazy details about my house. I will tell you, I love the Hello Nest doorbell. I have tried many, 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 many doorbells. Yes, this is expensive. Yes, I wish I did not have to pay a subscription. I would love to have 24 hours of my video recording without paying a subscription. But hot diggity, it is an awesome low latency doorbell, great image quality at night, pitch black with the porch light, and the facial recognition feature is awesome because my notifications now say, your camera spotted Andrew at the front door. And I'm like, oh, I don't care about Andrew. He can come and go as he pleases. But then it's like, your camera spotted the delivery man. And the pictures it pulls out of people's faces is phenomenal. Like, I don't even know what my FedEx delivery guy looks like, but my Nest Cam now does because it grabs like the split second that he turns towards the door and is like, boom, I got it. So I like this doorbell a lot. I'm considering actually purchasing it for real. So now the Yale lock. I had trouble with my first Yale lock because I think a hardware problem. This was just a straight up, I don't think the touchpad worked. I'm still waiting for Nest to get back to me on the postmortem on the device I sent back to them. Was it me? Is it the lock? But they sent me a new lock right away, and I installed that in like 10 minutes, possibly less. Super easy. Everything worked. So I'm thinking the first experience was a total anomaly. Although I will say the customer support experience was pretty good for what it was. I mean, were they any smarter than I was? Probably not, but I am also not normal. And they did the handoff right. So I was like, that's fine. So the Yale lock it's a sturdy lock. You can feel it. Like, I replaced a quickset lock and the Yale lock is way sturdier. The touchpad is nice. We don't actually use the remote capability for it very much. I tested it out with the doorbell, so the doorbell rings and then I'm like, open the lock. And that happens very quickly. It's not going to work for the FedEx guy who just rings my doorbell and runs down the stairs. But it would work for a friend who's, expecting this sort of interaction to happen. So I don't know. Send me your questions on this because I am happy to answer them. I don't know if I'll keep it long enough to get battery life for you guys over the long term, but we'll see. And my next effort on this is actually to hook this up to the Chromecast so I can start talking to it via Google Home and getting those announcements. Because right now I have it set up to get the announcements, but I'm not getting the announcements. Because the theory is when someone comes to your door and the Nest doorbell knows who it is, they will say, Andrew, at your door, which is cool.
Yeah, I love having the Chromecast integration in my Android TV so that if the doorbell rings, I can just say, show me my Nest Cam right to the TV and boom, I can see who it is, for example. So
excellent. All right, so that's that so far. I should tell you the Nest Hello is $239 and the Nest Yale Lock is $279. Whew, that's pricey, but it is very pretty. I will say it's the prettiest lock I've seen in a while. Okay, moving on to our IoT Podcast Listener Hotline, which is brought to you by Schlage, maker of electronic locks. Schlage electronic locks offer unparalleled convenience and simplicity all on their own, right out of the box, so you don't have to have a smart home system to benefit. To see what's possible, visit schlage.com to learn more. And in this week's IoT Podcast Listener Hotline, we have Robert. So let's roll that clip.
Hi, my name is Robert from Phoenix. I have multiple Amazon devices in my house, upstairs and downstairs, and in the morning when you're getting ready, I like to listen to music and stuff upstairs on a playlist. Is there a way to continue the exact point in the playlist downstairs? Thanks. Love your guys' show. Bye.
Oh, Robert, this is a totally reasonable thing to want to do. And unfortunately, you can't do it with what you have. Yet.
That could change, but not yet.
So what you can do now is you can play your song, you can stop it, you cannot resume it in another room. You can send your songs to, you could play them in all the rooms at once. So maybe you just play it throughout the whole house, annoying everyone who lives there. Or you can buy a Sonos, which we think would work like this. So, Kevin, you want to tell them how you think the Sonos would work?
Yeah, I have two of the Sonos units that support Madam A. Unfortunately, I have them in the same room, so I haven't been able to test this. However, in scouring the web for a solution, apparently you can ask Madam A on the Sonos to pause music or resume in another room. So that would work in theory. Again, I have not tested it. But unfortunately, it doesn't help you anyway because that's not the devices that you have. I would think Amazon could easily add this. It doesn't seem too difficult. And they do, as Stacey mentioned, already support multi-room audio. So hopefully Amazon is listening to our pleas here and adds this feature in the near future.
Yes. We'll see. Sorry for the slightly bad news, but hey, it's a great excuse to blow. Is it $200 for the Sonos one?
It is $200. I don't know if they still have the pair for $350 to compete against HomePod or not.
I don't believe they do.
$199 for a single.
So there you go. So yeah, you would have to blow at least $400 if you want the multi-room action.
Yeah. Or stereo in one room like I have.
So there you have it, Robert. Sorry for the bad news. Amazon, get on Robert's problem, because it's a problem we all have.
Yes.
If you have a question for the Internet of Things podcast listener hotline, give us a call at 512-623-7424. We would love to answer your questions by testing it on our own devices or scouring the web or possibly calling the company and saying, hey, do you do this or not? And now I think we've got plenty of news taken care of. Stay tuned for my conversation with Microsoft's head of IoT, Sam George. He's going to talk about the stuff that Microsoft announced at Build, plus how businesses can avoid getting stuck in pilot purgatory. So it is a good conversation, good insight into your own business transformation and Microsoft's strategy for IoT. But before you can hear Sam, stay tuned for a message from this week's sponsor. Hey everyone, we are taking a break from this week's Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Machine Q, which is a Comcast service. And I have Alex Karam, who is GM of Machine Q. Alex, glad to have you back. So remind us, what is Machine Q again?
Machine Q is Comcast enterprise-grade network specifically built for IoT. We support B2B and B2B2C IoT solution use cases, and we have a growing and robust portfolio of business solutions that we're providing to end users as well.
In previous conversations, you've told me that one of the largest users of these low-power wide-area networks is metering. Can you talk about why?
Sure. So metering is a classic sort of LPWAN use case that LoRaWAN, the protocol we've chosen initially, solves for really well. The solution is, and the need for the client is power-constrained environments. These metering devices are required to be in the field for many years. They send roughly data every 15 minutes or so. And these devices are generally located in sort of challenged radio frequency environments, basements, pits, etc. The reason why it's ideal is because it allows solutions companies to get information from the devices whenever they need to the cloud.
In the metering space, you have a client that you recently announced called Neptune. Why did they choose Machine Q over something else?
As solution providers begin to understand what it takes to have their devices out in the field for many, many years, they've become to recognize and realize that all networks are not built equal. So being part of Comcast, Machine Q has the ability to build dense IoT networks. Working with a company like Neptune, which is the leader in the space, they began to realize that, again, if I'm able to send information from my water meter closer to a gateway that Comcast Machine Q has in the neighborhood or around sort of 100 feet or 200 feet from that location versus a traditional wireless build, which might be going to a cell tower, it changes the whole calculus for how that partner can actually enter the market. They can now use less power, which means they can spend less on building the actual device, which means the form factor changes. And ultimately, what happens is MachineQ is building a platform so every IoT solution provider can actually change their form factors, reduce their cost to be more competitive to their ultimate end user, in this case being municipalities.
So what can you do once you have these dense IoT networks in cities?
Once we have the base network in place for cities, the cities can easily add additional services like lighting, leak detection, anything you can imagine in terms of smart city applications can be layered on now that the network's already there.
Awesome. So where can we go to find out more?
You can start with our website at machineq.com. We have some great white papers on the site, including our latest on dense networks. There's technical and business product information services, including device conversion guides for anyone looking to develop on MachineQ. And we also have network coverage details and information about getting connected both in footprint and out of the Comcast footprint as well.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Sam George, who heads up Microsoft's IoT efforts. We are actually at Microsoft Build here in Seattle, and I am super excited to be actually physically sitting across the table from Sam. Hi Sam, how are you?
Hi Stacey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So we had him on, like 6 months, maybe a year ago, a while back.
I think so.
And we've talked a couple times. So we're going to start with the news from Build.
Yes.
Which was so IoT centric. And it felt like Microsoft gave me this huge magical strategy. So your job, Sam, is to just explain the magical strategy to us.
Excellent. All right. Let me just say that a very big focus of ours in IoT is to help customers benefit very quickly, right? At this point, we built out a very sophisticated set of services across devices and edge and cloud. And so we've been focused a lot on making that easy to deploy holistically with IoT solutions. So we have solution accelerators. We have some great new ones that are generally available this week. We have to also have IoT Central. And a big focus has been Edge. And so you saw IoT Edge in our keynote where we were demonstrating deploying AI models out to fancy Qualcomm cameras that we've developed in partnership with them, as well as DJI drones.
So Microsoft has actually been caring and doing a lot with IoT forever. Maybe the last 3 or 4 years, I feel like you guys have really made an effort. This week feels like the culmination of a lot of years of effort. So what have you learned in those last few years that have actually played out here?
Some of the big news that we had this week were all around how companies are using IoT devices, not just for sensing the world or for, receiving commands from the cloud, but also for running cloud workloads right on them. One of the insights that we had from working with customers is that data has gravity. And as lots of data is generated out on the edge, such as video data, it's often more practical to take the AI and compute and put it right on the device and operate on it there. It sort of forms this balance between the cloud and the edge in IoT. So there were a lot of announcements around Azure IoT Edge as a supporting platform for that.
And you guys actually announced that you were going to open source Azure
Yes.
IoT Edge.
Yes.
Talk about why you guys are doing that, because it feels very weird coming from Microsoft.
Some of the reasons why we're open sourcing it, in addition to increased transparency and trust that it provides, is that so it's already a cross-platform runtime. It runs on multiple versions of Linux as well as Windows IoT. And as customers want it to go to new platforms, we want to enable them to do that. And so open sourcing and then managing those contributions are a great way to enable that. We're also seeing that each customer has a slightly different requirement. And quite frankly, we don't want to be the bottleneck. I mean, Edge is a very hot topic right now. And so we want to enable them to bring their best work as well, be able to contribute to this Edge product.
With this, and as I look at Azure Sphere, I see that Microsoft is still very cloud-centric in the sense that you've got all this stuff running at the edge. It's not autonomous necessarily, but it needs to be able to call back to the cloud to get security updates, to maybe link in with AI training models, etc. Is there, in your worldview, a way for things to run completely cloud independent, or how do you handle those things with intermittent connections?
Yes, absolutely. So just last week, we announced that we are bringing Azure IoT Hub to Azure Stack, which can run entirely on premises entirely disconnected from Azure and can still work with Azure IoT Edge. So within a factory, for example, I could have an Azure Stack deployment connected to Azure IoT Edge devices that I'm deploying Azure Stack Intelligence.
And the security stuff?
The security service right now is running in Azure, and then we'll have future announcements about that as well on premises. But for now, the reason why we're running it in Azure is it's monitoring all of the endpoints worldwide. And so as we see threats emerging in one part of the world, we can get ahead of that.
Right. And that's kind of, I'm like, man, will we ever be cloud free? Not that I necessarily want that, but some people do. Let's talk about video, because you had a couple cool video demos, announcements. Where do you see video fitting in with the enterprise and industrial kind of clients?
One of the reasons why we showed video, and in particular video plus AI, is because in a lot of ways, video and AI can produce the ultimate sensor. It can provide sensors that can sense things that only humans can today. So if you think about a traditional sensor that's measuring temperature and humidity and vibration, when you're looking at things like visual defects on pipes, there's not a sensor for that. But AI running over video.
There are sensors that people use today to measure defects in pipes.
Yes. And if you're monitoring, hundreds of over thousands of miles, it can be impractical to deploy fleets that large versus having video being collected by drones with AI running on board can provide a very powerful sensor capability.
And if I take that, if I accept this worldview, and it does feel very compelling, where do you think that's going to get deployed? Because I sit there and I watch, like if I'm in a city, I think I was in Las Vegas, and I noticed the streetlights had 3 different sets of cameras. One was collecting parking data, one was at a different angle, was owned by the police station for something else. And so I'm imagining like all these cameras everywhere and all of that bandwidth. So is that efficient? How do you see us kind of, if we go all in on video, how will that kind of evolve to something a bit more efficient?
And I don't want to create the misperception that we're going all in on video. I do think that it's another tool in the toolbox. But in this example that you bring up, it's a perfect one because as you imagine a proliferation of these cameras, streaming all that video to some central location, whether it's an on-prem data center or the cloud, is really impractical. Instead, I'll take the parking one, for example, or this, the police camera. They might be looking for speeders, right? It's more practical to send a short clip plus the license plate as opposed to streaming the entire video stream to the cloud. So it's another example of processing on the edge and why edge computing is so important.
And you guys actually did brainwave at the edge.
Yes,
which
brainwave.
So, okay, y'all, they're using FPGAs, which are programmable chips, is the best way to think about it. And I feel like the edge here, and they're using it for machine learning. That was the key. Yep. So I feel like it's a little misleading because in this case, the edge is actually still a very fat and powerful edge as opposed to like a crazy sensor. But you're putting this thing at a gateway, and it's a project that basically lets you figure out what kind of workload this device is going to need to do for various different machine learning algorithms. And you can program your chip and optimize the hardware for
that specific use case.
Right.
Yeah. So let me talk a little bit about the problems that Project Brainwave solves, especially running on the edge. So if you think about running a high-scale inferencing engine where I'm recognizing some patterns in complex signals like video, if that's running in software, that's running much slower than it is in hardware. And FPGA chips are interesting because they're basically programmable chips. And so I can program them to have optimized code paths and very fast code paths to run that AI model. And so what you're seeing us do is to create support in Azure Machine Learning in the cloud to be able to target these brainwave chips on the edge, and then to be able to bring down not just the programming for those chips, but also the inference engine that leverage that programming. It makes these edge devices general purpose. And so today I might be recognizing license plates, tomorrow I might be recognizing dents in pipes, but I can configure them as the workload demands.
And what I think is really cool is you actually are working with Intel on these at the fat near edge, whatever. I've got to come up with a term for this, you guys. And you're working with Qualcomm, not on FPGAs, but optimizing Qualcomm Snapdragon chips for recognition at the super the power sipping edge.
We call it big edge and little edge just to keep things simple.
I like fat edge, but then I'm like skinny edge probably doesn't. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. Yeah. All right. We'll figure this out. Send me an email if you have a great idea. All right. So let's go into something that's a little nerdy, but bear with us because this is the way the world's going. So if you're doing IoT, you do need to pay attention to this. So let's talk about containers.
Yes.
Containers. All right. Let's quickly go into why you guys think containers are important.
Yes. When we were looking at our edge strategy years ago, it became clear that one of the biggest innovations in edge computing was going to be workload portability between the cloud and the edge. And at the same time IoT was happening and this edge computing revolution was happening, the container revolution was under full swing in the cloud. And containers are a great means of portability as well in the cloud. And so it was a very short line to draw between two dots to use containers as the mode of portability.
And containers, I should have defined the term for you guys. Containers are basically little blobs of compute infrastructure that you can move places that run the code that you need. So it contains all the libraries, everything you need. And the idea is you basically stick all of the libraries, the code, everything you need in this container that contains the storage, the compute, and you can just replicate. Is it replicating it? Is it because you're not physically moving it? You're basically...
They're being copied.
Yeah, you're spinning it up in one place or another. So that's what a container is. And we're seeing a lot of this. I'm actually, one of the craziest things I'm seeing is a lot of new startups coming up with container platforms for the edge, like Docker on light bulbs, which I'm like, okay, why not? So let's go a little deeper and talk about what makes these good for these connections.
Yes.
Is it just portability? Why does that matter?
It's portability at speed. So, conceptually you can think, it's not entirely correct, but conceptually you can think of a container as a very, very small VM. And in fact, what it is, it really is. And in fact, it's a delta, a very small difference of a base level operating system that it runs on. And so it enables massive portability because they're very small, quick to copy over networks and things like that. As we were designing our edge platform, we used that as portability. The other reason why we used it is because there's already an open ecosystem of things that run in containers. And we wanted to make those available on the edge as well. So as an example, if I'm a developer and I'm very fond of NoSQL, for example, and there's already a container and Docker Hub for it, I can just pull that down, deploy it out to my edge device, and away I go. I'm using NoSQL. And so the other part that we loved about the container approach is that it was a very open approach because all of those things already exist in the open using tools people are already familiar with. So we didn't want to reinvent wheels.
Makes sense. So you guys are now talking about going one level deeper, y'all. You guys are using Kubernetes as the orchestration layer for your containers. So what the heck is a virtual kubelet?
Great question. All right. So for a little context, we recently announced Kubernetes support for IoT Edge, which might seem like a little bit of an odd announcement, so it bears a little explanation. An edge device is, of course, typically a relatively small one, thinking, Raspberry Pi or larger. A Kubernetes cluster is typically spanning, multiple VMs in the cloud, running very powerful workloads, deploying, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of containers. So what we've done is the way Kubernetes works is that it deploys to a series of what's called Kubernetes nodes. And working with the community, we introduced this topic or this concept of what's called a virtual kubelet or a virtual node, you can think of it as. And so in my Kubernetes cluster, I can not only have nodes that are bound to virtual machines that I can, of course, place containers in, but I can also have this virtual kubelet. And we just introduced one called an IoT Edge Virtual Provider. And the way it works is that it runs in the cloud. And then anytime in Kubernetes that Kubernetes deployment, which has that virtual kubelet, that IoT Edge Provider, if you push a container to it, instead of placing it in a VM, we redirect it down to an IoT Edge device.
So it's like a sneaky redirect.
Sneaky redirect.
It's like if this were a cartoon, you would put up a picture of the door that
yes.
covers the actual exit and
That's
take
right.
them elsewhere. Okay.
That's right. That's how that works. And so in effect, what that does is it means I can now have a Kubernetes cluster that spans cloud and edge and deploy workloads across both at the same time.
See, so then Kubernetes actually becomes your OS for the cloud and the edge.
Becomes an orchestrator for the cloud and the edge.
Okay, so this is very exciting. And this gets into this concept that I've been evolving with analysts and smart people like yourself here, which is we're going for the IoT world. We're going to have the cloud. You're going to have the big edge, fat edge.
Big edge.
And then you're going to have your small
IoT
edge,
devices. Yeah.
IoT devices.
Yep.
And what you found with the virtual kubelets is a way to kind of span that all to wrap it all in this.
In our nomenclature, the way we think about it is, you have cloud, you have edge, which can run these containers from the cloud, and then you have IoT devices, which are really purpose-built, connected to sensors and things like that. So we see the Kubernetes cluster spanning cloud and edge, but then being able to, that entire cluster being able to work with IoT devices.
Okay, so it doesn't actually
Correct.
run out and
Correct. Because typically little IoT devices don't run containers.
like I said, there are light bulbs now that run Docker.
There are some of those, yeah.
So, okay, I came here hoping to hear newer use cases, and I feel like you and I have talked in the past about Rockwell and Hershey's.
Sure.
And there is a continuing issue in the business space where they're like, let's pilot the heck out of this. And then nothing ever goes very far. So what are you guys seeing in how are you adapting to clients getting stuck in pilot purgatory?
So something that I'm fond of saying is that IoT causes a digital transformation, right? A lot of people are talking about that. The digital part is super easy at this point. It's the transformation part. And so something that we've been doing recently with customers and with partners is that we have some very clear guidance about how IoT is going to impact your organization. For example, there are now very clear best practices on the right way to roll it out, right? What's the best way to start and build upon it? What are some of the pitfalls to avoid? What are some of the things that it's going to require? Like, as you get into new business models like service models, what are some of those best practices, especially if you're an organization that's not familiar with those? Those are often the reasons that will delineate a company having a pilot and a production. It's not the technology at this point, it's the people.
Okay, so guys, they actually have these online, so I will link to them in the show notes because I am sure all of you would like to get out of pilot purgatory. Thank you so much, Sam.
It's a pleasure as always, Stacey.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at staceyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.